The dining room smelled like roasted lamb and rosemary. I stood in the doorway, watching my family settle around the table, without glancing toward the empty chair that had been mine for 17 years. Mum placed the carved meat on the good china, the kind she only brought out when Claire came home from university. Dad poured wine into 3 glasses, not 4. Claire laughed at something he said, her hair catching the candlelight like spun gold. No one called my name. I waited another moment, my stomach hollow and tight. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked 7 times. Dinner started at 6:30. I'd been in my room since 4, finishing the college applications they never asked about. Wearing the dress I'd ironed that morning, hoping someone might notice I'd made an effort. The lamb smelled incredible. Mum had been cooking since noon. "Claire, tell your father about the internship," Mum said, her voice warm with pride. I stepped back from the doorway. My sock caught on the hardwood and I stumbled slightly, but the sound didn't carry. Or maybe it did, and they simply didn't register it as important enough to investigate. I climbed the stairs to my room, each step creaking in the old house's familiar language, and closed my door with a soft click. My phone showed no messages. The group chat, where Mum usually coordinated family things, had been active all day. 17 messages about Claire's favourite dessert, her dietary preferences, whether Dad should open the expensive wine. I scrolled up through weeks of history. The last message directed at me had been 3 weeks ago. "Olivia, pick up milk." I sat on my bed and stared at my college essay on the laptop screen. The cursor blinked in the middle of a sentence about family values and support systems. I deleted the paragraph. The house felt large and empty around me, even filled with their laughter downstairs. I could hear Claire's voice rising and falling, animated and bright. She'd always had that quality, this ability to fill a room with her presence, to make people lean toward her like flowers to sun. I'd never resented her for it. Not really. It wasn't her fault that next to her light, I became a shadow. I opened my desk drawer and found the granola bar I'd hidden there 2 days ago. It tasted like cardboard and artificial strawberry, but it stopped the ache in my stomach. I ate it slowly, listening to the celebration below, and wondered when exactly I'd become someone they could forget. Not forget. That implied they'd remembered me first. The numbness came gradually, like frost creeping across a window. I stopped going downstairs during mealtimes. It seemed pointless to sit at a table where my presence registered as neutral space, where conversations flowed around me like water around a stone. I bought instant noodles from the corner store with babysitting money, kept them hidden in my closet, along with a small electric kettle. I ate in my room while they ate together, and no one knocked to ask where I was. Days passed, then weeks. Claire stayed for the entire winter break, and the house orbited around her schedule. Early breakfasts before her morning runs, elaborate dinners with Dad's colleagues, a New Year's party where I stayed upstairs and listened to champagne corks popping, to toasts celebrating her achievements, her bright future, her inevitable success. On New Year's Day, I came down at noon to find the kitchen destroyed. Dishes piled high, champagne flutes with lipstick marks, half-eaten canapes going stale on silver platters. Mum was asleep on the couch, Dad was in his study, and Claire had driven back to campus that morning without saying goodbye. I cleaned everything. It took 3 hours. When Mum woke up, she walked into the spotless kitchen, poured herself coffee, and went back to the living room without comment. I stood at the sink with dishwater cooling on my hands, and realised I'd spent the first day of the new year erasing evidence of a celebration I hadn't been invited to. Something inside me made a sound like glass breaking, but very far away. I stopped expecting things after that. I stopped hoping someone would notice I'd lost weight, stopped checking if they'd ask about the college acceptance letters that started arriving in February, stopped imagining conversations where they'd apologise, where they'd say they hadn't meant to overlook me, where everything would somehow become warm again. I simply existed in parallel to them. We shared a house, but not a life. In March, I got accepted to a university 8 hours away, with a full academic scholarship. The letter came on a Tuesday. I read it 3 times, feeling nothing, then put it in my desk drawer with the others. That night, they took Claire to her favourite restaurant to celebrate her law school acceptance. I made instant ramen in my room and researched apartments near my future campus, places I could afford with a part-time job, small studios where I could learn to live visibly again. The spring semester ended, summer arrived hot and dense. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a bookstore, evenings babysitting for neighbours. I saved every dollar. I bought a used set of dishes, some cheap silverware, a good knife. I hid them in boxes under my bed like treasure, like tickets to a future where I mattered. In July, I came home from work to find my boxes had been moved. Mum had been cleaning, reorganising the house for Claire's graduation party. My dishes were stacked in the garage, still in their boxes labelled miscellaneous donate. I carried them back upstairs. No one asked what they were for. The night before Claire's graduation party, I made myself a promise. After this summer, after I left for university, I would never come back. Not for holidays, not for emergencies, not for guilt or obligation or the faint hope that absence might make them notice what they'd lost. I would cook my own meals in my own kitchen. I would set my own table. I would exist loudly and fully in a life I'd built from scratch. And when they finally thought to look for me, I'd be too far away to hear them calling. The graduation party was the biggest event the house had ever seen. Caterers filled the backyard with white tents and elegant tables. 200 guests arrived in cocktail attire. Claire wore cream lace and received congratulations. Like a bride, like a queen. Mum and Dad stood beside her, radiant with pride, posing for photographs that would hang in the hallway alongside all her other achievements. I spent the party in the kitchen, refilling ice buckets and carrying out trays when the catering staff fell behind. People thanked me absently, mistaking me for hired help. One of Dad's law partners tried to hand me his empty glass. I took it without correcting him. Near sunset, I carried a tray of champagne flutes through the garden. The golden light painted everything beautiful. The white tents, the string lights, Claire laughing in her lace dress, Mom's hand on Dad's shoulder, their family complete and perfect in this moment I wasn't part of. I set down the tray and walked toward the house. No one called after me. In the kitchen, I made myself a plate from the catering leftovers, salmon and roasted vegetables, a small slice of the graduation cake. I ate standing at the counter, watching through the window as the party continued without me, and felt the last thread connecting me to this family finally snap. It made no sound. It left no mark. But I felt it go. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the cleanup crew pack away tables and chairs. The house settled around me, creaking and shifting. My alarm clock's green numbers marked the hours: midnight, 1, 2, 3. At 4 a.m, I got up and started packing. I worked methodically, filling boxes with clothes and books and the small collection of things that mattered. My acceptance letter, my scholarship documents, my hidden dishes and the good knife. I stacked everything neatly against the wall and sat on my bed, watching dawn light creep across the carpet. My chest felt tight and strange. My hands were cold. I recognized these symptoms from health class: panic attack, anxiety response, stress reaction. But underneath the clinical knowledge was something deeper, something that felt like my body preparing for an ending. I went downstairs to get water. The kitchen still smelled like catered food and expensive champagne. I filled a glass at the sink and drank it standing in the dark. The glass slipped from my hand. It happened slowly and quickly at once. The glass falling, my knees giving out. Anything else, the cold tile rising to meet me. My head struck the cabinet corner with a sound like wood knocking on wood, and then I was lying on the floor watching my own blood pool darkly around the broken glass. I thought about calling for help. I thought about screaming, but my voice felt far away and they probably wouldn't hear it anyway. They never heard me. The ceiling blurred, the kitchen dimmed. I could hear my heartbeat growing slower, quieter, like music from another room. I wondered if they'd notice tomorrow, if Mum would come down for coffee and find me here, if she'd cry, if they'd wish they'd done something different, said something kinder, seen me before I disappeared. The wondering didn't last long. The ceiling faded to black and everything became very quiet and still. When I opened my eyes, I was 14 again. I knew it immediately, not through logic or deduction, but through the instant recognition of my younger hands, my longer hair, the specific pattern of afternoon light on my bedroom ceiling that I hadn't seen in years. I sat up in my old bed wearing pajamas I'd donated 3 years ago, and I understood with perfect clarity that I'd been given something impossible and precious. A second chance. My phone showed the date, September the 2nd, 3 years earlier. School had just started. Claire was in her first year of university. I was beginning high school, that terrible stretch of years when I'd slowly become invisible. But not this time. I got up and looked at myself in the mirror. 14-year-old me looked back, younger face, uncertain eyes, body not quite grown into itself. But inside, I carried 3 years of knowledge. 3 years of being overlooked and forgotten. 3 years of learning that waiting for someone to notice you was just another way of disappearing. I would not wait this time. I would not hope for them to see me. I would not shrink myself smaller and quieter, trying to make space for their attention to find me. I would simply exist on my own terms, in my own orbit, and build a life they couldn't touch. The decision felt calm and clear, like a mathematical proof. No anger, no desperation, just quiet certainty. I went downstairs. Mum was cooking dinner, chicken and roasted potatoes. Nothing special. Dad was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. They both looked up when I entered, surprised to see me home early. "Hi, Olivia," Mum said. "Good day at school?" "Fine," I said. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients. Eggs, cheese, vegetables. "I'm making myself dinner tonight," Mum frowned. "I'm cooking chicken. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. "I know. I want something different." I found a pan, turned on the stove. My movements felt sure and practiced, muscle memory from years of cooking in secret. "Olivia, don't be difficult. I'm making dinner for the family." "You're making dinner for you and Dad," I said calmly, cracking eggs into a bowl. "I'm making dinner for me. It's not difficult. It's efficient." Dad lowered his newspaper. Is there something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just prefer to cook for myself." They exchanged that look, the one parents use when they're trying to decode teenage behaviour. I ignored it and focused on whisking eggs, adding cheese, chopping, vegetables, with the good knife I'd learnt to use in my first life's last months. "Since when do you cook?" Mum asked. "Since now?" I made myself a perfect omelette, fluffy and golden, filled with sautéed peppers and mushrooms. I plated it carefully, added toast and orange juice, and sat at the table while Mum's chicken finished cooking. I ate slowly, tasting everything. The eggs were better than I remembered. Everything tasted brighter, sharper, more real. Dad watched me over his newspaper. "This is about Claire being gone, isn't it?" "No. Because you know we still have time for you, sweetheart. Just because your sister's at university doesn't mean..." "Dad, this isn't about Claire." I looked at him directly. "This is about me taking care of myself. That's all." I finished my meal, washed my dishes, and went back upstairs before Mum's timer rang. Behind me, I heard them talking in low, confused voices. Let them be confused. Confusion was better than invisibility. The pattern established itself quickly. I cooked my own meals. I ate on my own schedule. When Mum made family dinner, I'd eat beforehand or afterward, always polite but separate. I stopped waiting to be included and simply included myself in my own life. At first, they tried to intervene. Mum would insist I eat with them. Dad would say I was being antisocial. But I never argued or explained. I just quietly continued, and eventually they stopped asking. The freedom was extraordinary. I ate what I wanted, when I wanted. I experimented with recipes from the internet, teaching myself to cook properly instead of surviving on instant noodles. I made pasta from scratch, learned to roast vegetables perfectly, practiced knife skills until I could dice an onion in 30 seconds. Cooking became meditation. In my first life, I'd hidden in my room and disappeared. In this life, I occupied the kitchen like territory claimed, and my presence became unavoidable. September passed into October. Claire came home for a weekend and found me making homemade pizza when Mum had ordered takeout for everyone else. "What are you doing?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Making dinner." Mum ordered pizza. "I know, I wanted pizza made differently." Claire watched me stretch dough, spread sauce, arrange toppings. "Since when are you domestic?" "Since I got hungry." I slid the pizza into the oven and set the timer. "How's school?" We talked while I cooked. An actual conversation where she seemed to see me as a person rather than a fixture. When my pizza came out perfect, crispy crust, melted cheese, fresh basil, she asked for a slice. I cut her a piece and watched her eat it with a surprise crossing her face. "This is really good, Liv." The nickname felt strange. She'd never called me that before. Or maybe she had, and I'd been too invisible to hear it. "Thanks," I said. That night at dinner, the ordered pizza sat in greasy boxes while Claire kept talking about my homemade version. Mum looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Not pride, but maybe a seed of awareness that I existed in ways she hadn't noticed. Winter arrived. Claire came home for the holidays, and the house began its familiar orbit around her schedule. But this time, I didn't reshape myself to accommodate it. When they planned elaborate breakfasts, I made myself eggs at 10. When they scheduled family dinners, I ate beforehand or later. When they had a New Year's party, I stayed in the kitchen, making myself a proper meal instead of hiding upstairs with instant noodles. "Olivia, you're being rude," Mum said, finding me cooking during the party. "We have guests." "I'm not being rude. I'm eating." "You could eat with everyone else." "I'm not hungry at the same time as everyone else." I plated my stir-fry carefully, vegetables still crisp, sauce coating everything evenly. "You throw your party, I'll cook my dinner. We can both do what we want." She stared at me like I'd grown an extra head. In her memory, I was the quiet daughter who never caused problems, who faded into backgrounds, who could be counted on to accommodate and disappear. She didn't know what to do with this version, the girl who cooked her own meals and claimed her own space and refused to be overlooked. I took my plate upstairs and ate while reading a book I'd checked out from the library. Through the floor, I could hear the party continuing, but the sound felt distant and unimportant. I was full. I was content. I was separate. Spring came. I'd been living in this second life for 7 months, and I'd changed everything without changing anything. I still attended the same school, lived in the same house, shared space with the same family. But I'd drawn a boundary around myself, and inside that boundary, I existed on my own terms. The college acceptance letters started arriving. I got into the same universities as my first life, including the one 8 hours away with the full scholarship. I opened each letter calmly, filed them in my desk drawer, and made no announcement. In my first life, I'd hoped they'd ask. I'd waited for them to notice the important mail, to inquire about my future, to show some interest in where I'd spend the next 4 years. They never had. This time, I didn't give them the chance to disappoint me. I simply handled my own business and said nothing. One evening in April, Dad came into the kitchen while I was making myself dinner, Seared salmon with lemon butter sauce and roasted asparagus, a recipe I'd perfected over months of practice. "That smells incredible," he said. "Thanks." He poured himself scotch and leaned against the counter. "Your mother's worried about you." "Why?" "You're so separate lately. You don't eat with us, you barely talk to us. She thinks you're angry about something." I flipped the salmon, watching the skin crisp perfectly. "I'm not angry." "Then, what is it?" I considered my answer carefully. The truth was too complicated. How do you explain that you died in another timeline? Because they forgot you existed, that you came back with the knowledge that waiting for love is just slow starvation. How do you say that without sounding insane or cruel? "I'm just taking care of myself," I said finally. "That's all." "But why? We take care of you. That's what parents do." The salmon finished. I plated it with the asparagus, drizzled the lemon butter sauce, added a garnish of fresh dill. The plate looked like something from a restaurant. "Dad," I said gently, "when's the last time you asked about my day?" He frowned. "We ask all the time." "You ask if school was fine. That's not the same as asking about my day." "Okay. How was your day?" "I got into Stanford with a full academic scholarship. Early admission. They sent the letter 3 weeks ago." His face went through several expressions. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been shame. 3 weeks ago? Why didn't you tell us?" "You didn't ask what mail I'd received. You were busy planning Claire's spring break." "Olivia, it's fine, Dad, really. I'm handling it myself. I don't need help with college stuff. I've already researched apartments and part-time jobs. I start in September." I took my plate to the table and began eating. The salmon was perfect. Crispy skin, tender flesh, the lemon butter sauce balanced and bright. I'd made this for myself on my own time, and it was exactly what I wanted. Dad stood at the counter, still holding his scotch. "I don't understand you anymore." "You never did," I said, not unkindly. "But that's okay. I understand myself." May arrived with Claire's graduation approaching. The house transformed into Party Central again. Caterers, guest lists, elaborate planning. Mum spent weeks orchestrating every detail, and I watched the familiar pattern repeat with the detachment of someone who'd seen this movie before. But this time, I knew how it ended. This time, I wouldn't spend the party in the kitchen, invisible and forgotten. This time, I'd simply not attend. The morning of the graduation, I packed a backpack with essentials and left before anyone woke. I took the bus to the city, spent the day at the art museum, and had dinner at a small restaurant where I ordered whatever I wanted and ate slowly, tasting everything. My phone buzzed around noon, Mum asking where I was. I texted back, "Out for the day, congratulations to Claire." It buzzed again at 6. "The party is starting, where are you?" "Still out, have fun." And then at 9, "Olivia, this is unacceptable, get home now." I turned off my phone and ordered dessert. I got home around 11 to find the party winding down. Mom was waiting in the kitchen, her face tight with anger. "Where were you?" "I told you. Out." "This was Claire's graduation party, your sister's major achievement. You couldn't be bothered to attend?" I set down my backpack and poured myself water. "Did she notice I wasn't there?" Mum faltered. "What?" "Claire, did she ask where I was? Did she seem disappointed?" "Well, she was busy with guests." "Right, so my absence didn't actually affect anything. The party was perfect without me." I drank my water slowly, which means my presence wasn't necessary, which means I made the right choice to spend the day how I wanted. "You're being incredibly selfish." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just being honest about what my presence means to this family." I set down the glass. "I'm going to bed. I'm glad Claire's graduation was everything you wanted it to be." I walked upstairs before she could respond. In my room, I unpacked my backpack and looked at the Stanford acceptance letter on my desk. 4 months until I left. 4 months until I was truly separate. I could wait 4 months. June passed in quiet preparation. I worked my jobs, saved my money, bought the things I'd need for my apartment. I researched the campus, joined online groups for incoming students, planned my class schedule. I built my future carefully, brick by brick, and told my family nothing. They seemed to notice my absence more in its certainty than they ever had when I was present. I wasn't avoiding them exactly. I was just elsewhere, always elsewhere, existing in spaces they didn't think to look. One evening in July, Mum came to my room. She knocked, which was unusual. I opened the door to find her standing there with something uncertain in her expression. "Can I come in?" "Sure." She sat on my bed, looking around at my room. The packed boxes stacked against the wall, the bare spaces where posters used to hang, the organised chaos of someone preparing to leave. "You're really going," she said. "I told you I was. I know, I didn't realise you were so ready to leave." I sat at my desk chair and waited. She was building towards something, and I was curious what shape it would take. "I feel like I don't know you anymore," she said finally. "You used to be so easy, so quiet and accommodating. Now you're this stranger who cooks her own meals and misses family events and doesn't talk to us about anything important." "I was always a stranger," I said. "You just didn't notice because quiet is easy to overlook." "That's not fair, isn't it? When's my birthday, Mum?" She blinked. "October 16th. "What's my favourite food?" Pasta? "What do I want to study in college?" Silence. "I'm going to major in architecture," I said quietly. "I've wanted to be an architect since I was 12. I've designed buildings in every notebook I own. I've visited every Frank Lloyd Wright house within driving distance. I've built models and studied structural engineering and spent 3 years preparing for a career you never asked about. Olivia, I'm not angry, Mum, I'm really not. But I stopped waiting for you to notice me. I stopped hoping that if I was good enough, or quiet enough, or convenient enough, you'd see me the way you see Claire. I just started seeing myself instead." I gestured around my room. "This is what that looks like. Me taking care of me. Me cooking at my own time, living on my own schedule, building my own life." She was crying. I handed her a tissue from my desk. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know. Can we fix this?" I thought about that question. In my first life, I would have said yes immediately, would have grabbed onto any promise of attention like a drowning person grabbing driftwood. But I'd already drowned once. I'd already learned what it meant to wait for rescue that never came. "Maybe," I said, "but not right now. Right now, I need to leave. I need to go build something that's mine, in a place where I'm not the invisible daughter or the other sister. I need to be just Olivia, and I need to figure out what that means." "Will you come home for holidays?" "Probably not the first year." She flinched. "I'm not trying to punish you," I said gently. "I'm trying to find myself. And I can't do that here where I've already learned to be invisible." She left eventually, and I sat at my desk watching the sunset paint my room gold. In 4 weeks, I'd be gone. In 4 weeks, I'd start the life I'd spent 2 lifetimes preparing for. August arrived. My last month at home passed in a strange, suspended peace. My family tried harder. Dad asked about my day with actual interest. Mum invited me to do things together. Claire called from the city to check in. But the attempts felt late and awkward, like learning a dance after the music stopped. I wasn't cruel. I accepted their gestures with grace. But I also didn't let them rewrite the history we'd lived. 3 years of invisibility couldn't be erased by 4 weeks of attention. The night before I left, I cooked one last meal in that kitchen. I made everything I'd learned to make. Homemade pasta, roasted vegetables, herb-crusted chicken, fresh bread. I set the table for 4 and called my family to dinner. They came down surprised, expecting another meal where I'd be separate. But this time, I wanted them to eat what I'd made. I wanted them to taste what I'd become in the months since I'd stopped waiting for them to feed me. We sat together, the 4 of us, and ate the meal I'd prepared. No one spoke much. The food filled the silence better than words could have. "This is incredible," Claire said finally. "You're an amazing cook, Liv." "Thanks. I had a lot of practice." Dad cleared his throat. "I'm proud of you. For the scholarship, for all of this. I should have said it sooner." "You're saying it now." Mum reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm going to miss you." "I know." After dinner, I washed the dishes alone. I wanted to do it myself. This last act in this kitchen. I dried each plate carefully, put everything away in its proper place, and wiped down the counters until they shined. The kitchen looked exactly as it had 3 years ago, when I'd bled out on this floor in another life. But everything was different. I was different. I'd stopped dying slowly and started living deliberately, and that had changed the entire story. I went upstairs to my empty room, lay down on my bed, and slept deeply and dreamlessly. Morning came bright and clear. Dad loaded my boxes into the car. Mum made coffee and breakfast, which I ate to make her happy. Claire drove in from the city to say goodbye. We all stood in the driveway, family of 4, and something in the configuration felt almost right. "Call us when you get there," Mum said, hugging me. "I will." "And come home for Thanksgiving?" "I'll think about it." Claire hugged me next. "I'm sorry I wasn't a better sister." "You were fine. You just weren't responsible for seeing me. That was their job." I glanced at our parents, and it was my job to make myself visible. I'm doing that now. Dad's hug was brief and tight. "Make us proud." "I'll make myself proud. That's more important." I got in the car and drove away from the house I'd lived in twice, leaving it behind in the rearview mirror. 8 hours to campus. 8 hours to a future I'd chosen and claimed and built with my own hands. I stopped halfway for lunch at a diner. I ordered exactly what I wanted. A burger with everything, fries, a chocolate shake. I ate slowly at the counter, tasting everything, and thought about how far I'd come from the girl who'd eaten granola bars in hiding. The waitress refilled my water. Big drive? Starting college, moving into my apartment today. First time away from home. Second time, actually. But this time I know what I'm doing. She smiled. Good for you, honey. I paid my check, left a generous tip, and got back on the road. The landscape changed as I drove, familiar terrain giving way to new horizons. The GPS counted down miles to my destination, to my future, to the life I'd earned by refusing to disappear. I arrived at sunset, golden light painting the campus beautiful. My apartment was small and empty, but it was mine. I carried my boxes upstairs alone, refusing help from enthusiastic RAs. I wanted to do this myself. I unpacked my dishes first, the ones I'd bought and hidden and carried through 2 lifetimes. I washed them carefully and arranged them in the small kitchen cabinet. Then, I unpacked my good knife, my cooking utensils, my simple collection of equipment. I made myself dinner in my own kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta with olive oil and garlic, a simple salad, bread from the bakery down the street. But I made it at my own time, on my own schedule, in my own space. I set a single place at my small table. I lit a candle I'd bought on the drive. I poured myself water in a glass that was mine. And I ate slowly, tasting everything, present in every bite. The pasta was perfectly al dente. The garlic was fragrant and golden. The salad was crisp and fresh. Everything tasted exactly right because I'd made it for myself. and that made all the difference. After dinner, I washed my dishes and stood at the window, looking out at the campus. Somewhere out there, my family was probably having dinner together. Maybe they noticed the empty chair, maybe they missed me, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they'd filled the space I'd left with other things, other conversations, other priorities. It didn't matter anymore. I'd stopped waiting for them to notice I'd skipped dinner. I'd started cooking for myself at my own time. And in that simple act of self-sufficiency, I'd found something more valuable than their attention. I'd found myself. The sunset faded to twilight. The campus lights came on one by one. In my small apartment, in my own kitchen, with my own dishes clean and put away, I stood at the window and felt completely, perfectly whole. I was visible. I was solid. I was here. And that was enough.